Something pretty major is going down in the world of housing right now. The federal government is looking to change a single rule that could completely reshape how we fight discrimination in real estate. So what is this rule, and why is it causing such a stir? Let's get into it. Okay, let me ask you something. Imagine your city passes a new rule to make neighborhoods safer. It says landlords can't rent to anyone with a criminal record. On the surface, it seems totally fair, right? It applies to everyone. But what if that rule ends up disproportionately affecting one group of people over others? That's the real heart of the issue we're exploring today. Can a rule be unfair, even if nobody meant for it to be? And that question brings us to this big legal idea called disparate impact. The easiest way to think about it is this. It's not about what you intended, it's about what actually happened. A policy can be seen as discriminatory if the result is an unfair outcome for a certain group, even if that was never the goal. This one concept, it's at the absolute center of this whole debate. So how are we going to wrap our heads around all this? Well, we've broken it down into 5 parts. First, we'll look at the huge shift happening at the federal level. Then, we'll check in on what this actually means for real estate pros on the ground. We're going to talk about this guidance vacuum that's leaving everyone scratching their heads. Then, we'll see who's actually stepping up to enforce the rules. And finally, we'll dive into the new kinds of risks that are popping up in this changing landscape.
All right, so what is the big deal exactly? Well, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, you probably know them as HUD, is proposing to get rid of its official instructions on how to use the disparate impact rule. Now get this, the rule itself isn't going away, but the government's own playbook on how it works, that could be gone. And that, my friends, is a really big deal.
And trust me, this is not a new fight. You can see here the rule was officially put on the books in 2013. The Supreme Court gave it the green light in 2015, and it was just reinstated last year after some changes. This thing has been a political football tossed back and forth for more than a decade, with every new administration trying to leave its mark on how fair housing is handled. So who's in which corner on this one? Well, on one side, you have folks who say the government is just doing too much. They argue for equal treatment and say it should be up to the courts to decide what's fair, not a bunch of regulators. But on the other side, people are worried that without this official guidance, we lose a key tool to fight subtle discrimination. They're afraid we'll end up with a confusing mess where the rules are totally different depending on where you live.
Now, with all this drama in Washington, you'd think the real estate world would be in a total panic, right? But here's the interesting part. When you actually talk to the people working on the front lines, you hear a very different story. For a lot of them, it's pretty much business as usual.
Just listen to what Las Vegas realtor Debbie Drummond has to say. She doesn't think this change from the federal government is really going to move the needle on how agents do their job day to day. So why is that? I mean, if the feds are changing the rules of the game, why wouldn't things change on the field? Well, it turns out that federal guidance is really just one piece of the puzzle. Think of it like a layer cake of rules. You've got the Realtor Code of Ethics on one layer, state-level training you have to take just to get your license on another, and then strict rules from professional groups on top of that. All those other layers, they are still very much in place.
Okay, so if it's business as usual, does this whole federal rollback even matter? Oh yeah, it matters a lot. But the problem isn't that the rules are vanishing. The real problem is what's being called a guidance vacuum, this huge empty space where clear instructions from the top used to be.
Real estate attorney Joanne Nesta Burnett just nails it here. She says everyone is in a state of limbo. Can you imagine? You're a professional trying to follow the rules, but the official rulebook's been snatched away. That's the spot so many people are in right now.
So how did we get into this limbo state? Well, first, HUD pulled back more than 10 years' worth of memos that explained how the Fair Housing Act actually works in the real world. Then, they just didn't replace them with anything. And the result of that is, you guessed it, a whole lot of confusion.
And this isn't just some abstract legal puzzle. We're talking about real situations. How is a landlord supposed to handle a request for an emotional support animal now? What's the right way to use criminal background checks? How do we make sure we're protecting LGBTQ+ individuals from housing discrimination? Without that federal guidance, these critical questions are just floating out there. All of this uncertainty leads to the million-dollar question. If the federal government isn't handing out the playbook anymore, who's the referee? Who is actually out there enforcing the rules of fair housing? Let's take a look.
Now, check this out, because these numbers might really surprise you. The federal government, like HUD, only handles about 5% of all fair housing complaints. just 5%. The vast majority of the enforcement, the real heavy lifting, has always been done at the state and local level, by private groups and by people filing lawsuits.
And just in case anyone thought this was a free-for-all, the biggest organization in the industry, the National Association of Realtors, is sending a message that is crystal clear. They're telling their members, the Fair Housing Act is the law of the land, period. The guidance might be gone, but the law isn't going anywhere.
So what does this new era of enforcement look like? We're seeing a really interesting power shift. State governments are beefing up their own fair housing teams. Nonprofits and private lawyers are filing more cases. Even journalists are getting in on the act with big investigations. Enforcement isn't going away, it's just getting more local. But this new, more localized world creates its own set of challenges. We're not just talking about the obvious, blatant kind of discrimination anymore. The new frontier, the real battleground for fair housing, is all about the subtle, almost invisible biases that can sneak in, even when people have the best intentions. So what do these new risks even look like? Well, it could be a thinking trap, where an agent unconsciously steers a family toward a neighborhood because they think they'll fit in better there. Or it could be something super high-tech, like using a new AI tool to screen tenants that has hidden biases baked right into its code. This is the future of fair housing.
So how is the real estate industry stepping up to meet these new challenges? They're rolling out a massive new training requirement. Every single one of the 1.5 million realtors in the entire country will now have to complete 2 hours of fair housing training every 3 years. That is a huge commitment to getting everyone on the same page.
And that brings us to our final and maybe most important question of all. In this shifting landscape of fair housing with new rules and new risks, who's ultimately left holding the bag? Is it the real estate industry trying to navigate this complicated new maze? Or is it the average person who's just trying to find a home? That's the question we're all left to grapple with.